Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Um, for those of you that have joined the blog before, good to see you again. For those of you that are joining me for the first time, I hope you find it really informative and useful. Over the past weeks, we've been discussing a number of issues relating to attention deficit disorders. We discussed the chemical basis, we discussed hereditary factors, we also chatted about the various behaviors that comprise attention deficit disorders. And today we're going to spend some time chatting about the systemic impact of attention deficit disorders. Now, what do I mean by that? Simply, it means that all of us, children, parents, grandparents, we all function within a system where there are various forces that push and pull, encourage, correct, so that we may find the best way to do things. Now, of course, in the case of the attention deficit disorder child, this can become a bit complicated because the system can also have a pronounced negative effect depending on how it is managed. So, first off, let's just have a look at the informal system of the child. This is probably the most important system and comprises parents, grandparents, and friends. Now, the issue, of course, with parents and grandparents is that they want something better for their child than they had for themselves. So they may put an undue amount of pressure or expectations on the child to fulfill these fantasies. Of course, when we get to ADD, ADHD, which is a permanent condition and which has a very significant effect on behavior, this system can actually become quite conflicted and stressed, especially for the parents, because on the one hand, the parents have to sort of look their own parents in the eye and try and satisfy them and live according to whatever morals and behaviors are sought after. And of course, if the child's constantly in trouble, not only at school but at home, grandparents can become upset, opinionated. They could express views like the parents are lax, the parents do not discipline the child enough. They could refer back to their own experiences and say, well, all the child needs is just a good hiding, and then all of this will be sorted. Of course, in the position of the parents realize that they've tried everything. They've tried talking, they've tried hiding, they've tried pleading, they've taken away Xboxes, PlayStations, phones, you name it, but the behavior persists. And in a situation like that, it's of course very difficult for the parents to remain supportive of the child, especially if the father and the mother are at odds about how they perceive the child's condition. We may actually find that there's a lot of blame going around where dad may blame mom for, you know what, you're at home, you should be educating this child, and you're just making a big mess. Or on the other hand, if the mother leaves the child with the father on a Saturday morning, it ends up in a shouting match and punishment, or just ignoring the child. So it's difficult because there's lots of forces interacting here, and of course then the child also has his own group of friends. And if at school he's been struggling and he's being reprimanded and punished and put into detention because of his ADHD, he may seek out friends with the same type of difficulty, which again may lead to negative feedback from the teacher to the parents. Obviously, because the ADHD does not go away, there can be a lot of conflict, strain, criticism within the family, and in fact, some parents may actually feel shamed or embarrassed about their inability to address the child's behavior. An added source of pressure, of course, is when the teacher becomes involved, especially if you have a teacher who does not understand the nature of ADD or ADHD, where first off there's been some punishment work in class for walking around or not finishing tasks and so on. But then, once the teacher's fed up, the teacher will confront the parents and say, well, you guys now need to do something because, I've had it. I've now tried everything, and, he's disorganized, and look at his books, and he shouts out in my class, and he walks around, and he's disruptive, and often, this feedback to the parents is provided in a tone of frustration, which again puts pressure on the parents to try and solve a problem at home, which the teacher should be solving at school. It's especially with your more rigid, perfectionistic teacher that these kids really fall out of the bus. They cope much better with teachers that are empathetic but structured, and who are willing to try again with the child on a daily basis. Once the parents have tried everything they can and they're still getting criticism from, their own system, and they're also getting criticism from the teacher, they may in fact then decide to seek more formal help, which could be an occupational therapist, a remedial teacher, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a pediatrician, to try and get to the bottom of this. Of course, at this point, some parents will offer, well, at least some parents will offer a lot of resistance because they are suspicious about the potential role that things like medication can play. So they will first seek alternative routes in terms of therapies and supplements and so on. The problem, of course, is, especially in the area of supplements, is that there are not really any double-blind studies that support the efficacy of these substances. So we have the parents having to interface with the school and with the medical and therapeutic profession in an effort to try and manage this issue. If we examine this a bit closer and we specifically look at the informal system, it's important to say that an informal support system can be very valuable and helpful if it is well managed and where members of the support system are given specific tasks. But there's a lot of grief tied up into this because obviously not only parents but also grandparents have to deal with a sense of loss. They see that their hopes and dreams for the child aren't realized, and in a way they have to let their fantasy child go so that they can deal with the real child.